And we want to know, if your child comes to you with these kind of anxieties, what's the best way to handle it? I'm joined now by Maria Osborne, who is educational and child psychologist. Maria, you're very welcome.
Thanks very much, and thanks for the opportunity to come on and talk about such an important topic.
It is a great pleasure. Can I start with the first question that I think any parent will be challenged by when a child comes up to them is the decision whether or not to talk to them about their concerns. Because I suspect parents on the one hand think, well, I don't want to make it worse by pandering or by indulging something that they should get past. But on the other hand, I don't want to fail to engage if they're really worried.
Yeah, I actually think that's a brilliant question and a really good place to start. Like in terms of shoving it under the carpet and pretending it's not there, I would say no, absolutely. You need to name it to tame it. I would actually encourage children to really get in touch with their feelings, because you'll have a sense as a parent, and I know you're a parent too, like me, we've 3 kids between us, but it's, very much so, you've got to help children to name the emotion. That's the first point in all of this. So if you've got a hunch that your child is feeling anxious, you need to help them to label that emotion. And you might need to use, with very young children, you might need to use the help of books or visuals, but the first step would definitely be to name it, and then to normalise it. Say, look, it's okay to feel worried about things, and acknowledge that emotion. You have been through a lot. We've all been through a lot lately, whether it's the pandemic, the changes after the pandemic, like that changed everything for children. It changed how they interacted with other children, how they interacted with screens, and their whole perspective of how stable and consistent the world is changing. And we can't change it. Like you said, Anton, about the Ukraine, we can't change our world, but we can change the inner world of our child, and we need to try to give our children roots so that they can weather any storm that comes their way. And that's a piece I'm really interested in as a psychologist.
You mentioned the Ukraine, or Ukraine rather. There's an instance of a particular challenge. A child may come to a parent having seen that there are behaviours, or there are attitudes, or there are actions that are completely anathema to everything they understand in their world to date. So they know that there is an evil person. They know that there is potentially, if they've heard news reports, people trying to kill each other or hurt each other. They may have heard about death or tragedy. All of these things that might never have been in their world before. How much do you take them on and say, well, there are people like that, and how much do you minimise?
Yeah, so I would say with the very young children, even children up to kind of the age of 10, they're getting all of their information from us as parents and from the home environment. And I know in schools, because we work in Sensational Kids, we work with a lot of schools as well, and the teachers aren't really giving any information there. But for the older children that are aware and that they hear it through their news feed, whether it's on their own social media pages or whatever, I think it is important to have that talk about it and say, yeah, look, there are a few terrible people in the world, but most of the world is flooded with love, and let's have a look at all the images of around the world. Moms leaving buggies in the train stations for moms and children that had to immigrate, and also, ask the child, well, is there anything you'd like to do? Is there any of your clothes or your toys that you might like to donate? And help them be proactive in sharing to the love that's also in the world. And I think Ireland in particular is playing a blinder with their response to the war. So to just really highlight that to the children, that's what we need to do. We need to show them that there is so much more love in the world, and when it comes to, their anxious thoughts, we can help children. We call it metacognition, but it's just thinking about your thinking. So teach children that they might be worried about, say, it could be a small worry. It mightn't be anything as big as those huge topics we talked about, but they need to learn that thoughts are not facts, and you can change your thoughts through changing your thinking, through positive self-talk and affirmations. Like with young children, it's good to help them to imagine their thoughts as just logs floating down a river, clouds in a in the sky. They come and they go. You know, we've over 6,000 thoughts a day. They're not all real. So, and as a parent, again, when you mention that conversation, you can bring it back to them and say, okay, listen, let's use logic to examine that thought and think, is it real? Is everybody really going to laugh at you if you go to the party or whatever it might be? You know, because I think, that's kind of the premise of cognitive behavioural therapy, that changing your child's thought processes can then change their thinking, which in turn changes their behaviour.
What do you do if you find a child facing something that is intrinsically negative and there's no way to put a gloss on it? Child comes home and says, for instance, so-and-so now refuses to play with me anymore, or I was excluded from a group or something like that. You can't get them to interpret that as positive because it's not. So what do you say?
Yeah, and I would say, first of all, I would not at all gloss over it. I agree there that I'd say that's not nice, you know, and really unfortunate. So you need to empathise with your child so that they know they've got that positive interaction with you. And we say every little interaction like that is actually an intervention to the child. So if they're stressed about it, I'd encourage them to, you know, engage in deep breathing exercises, like just 5 deep belly breaths will bring the body from that heightened sympathetic nervous system, that stressed fight or flight, to the parasympathetic rest, relaxed state. So first of all, give them strategies so that they can deal with what's happened in the day. And then, you know, brainstorm with them, look, how can we approach this the next time? You know, is there friends that you can explore your own games with, or is there something that we can say to the child, like, you know, brainstorm together, look, if you're being left out in games, how can you link into a game the next time? There's wonderful social stories that can help a child teach that. Carl Gray does great resources online around that.
Well, but you mentioned the issue of stress. How much do parents need to watch their own stress levels? Because particularly small children have an almost clairvoyant capacity to infer into an adult's behaviour their underlying mood.
Yeah, I agree with that so much. Like, calm is contagious. So if you're engaging in the practices of mindfulness yourself, or, you know, whatever you need to do to fill your own cup, whether it's going for a run or exercising, I think that's so important for your child. It's going to have a knock-on effect. And if you need to deal with all these issues with calm, in a really calm way, so as to benefit your child. And I say, like, when you're busy mum working, I was reading actually in the Central Statistics Office, 70% of two-parent families are actually working outside the home now. So that does place huge demands on themselves and on their ability to manage work, parenting balance, and then all these issues that might come up with your children. So I think it's really important to kind of scaffold or piggyback these calming strategies to help anxious children within your home. So something as simple as, when you're boiling the kettle in the morning, think of doing your own deep belly breaths so that you're starting the day on a calm note, you know, or meditate even with the children if you can. Meditation actually slows down the brainwaves, so it's a really good start to the day.
And I know it may be counterintuitive, but is there any advantage to children having to face some element of worry and stress? Because there will come a point where their life becomes wall-to-wall worry and stress like the rest of us. Yeah. So I assume you need to nudge them up to it.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah, look, I mean, there's so much good in the world, but there's bad as well, and children need to have, that's what I'm saying about, they need to have those roots to weather kind of whatever storm that comes their way. So absolutely, you know, I think, but I do think, like, I mean, specifically for a child that's anxious, you need to be able to deal with that first. And I would like to kind of go through a few tips for dealing with children that are anxious. But you can't pretend, especially with older children. They have to get a sense of that there is light and darkness in the world, and you do have to cope with like that. Not kind of like, if a family pet dies, just don't replace it with the bunny that looks the same. Just be like, yeah, look, that happened, and we're going to deal with it, because you have the strength to deal with this.
You mentioned some top tips. Give us your top 3 or 4.
Okay, sure. So With a very anxious child, I would suggest bringing in a visual schedule to make the day more predictable, especially around transitions. So even just the use of first happening in their day, and they know what's ahead of them. Progressive muscle relaxation is really good, which is just basically systematically tensing and then releasing particular muscle groups in the body. There's lovely scripts for that online. The Sleepy Rainbow is a lovely progressive muscle relaxation one to do before bedtime. Bring your child into nature. That's going to reduce stress, increase mental energy, creativity, and will also provide opportunities for all the problem solving, like dealing with when things don't go so good. You can develop a calming toolbox for your child and use like little fidget toys, even for the classroom, with blue tack or stretching, and reminder to do their breathing. The breath is one of the most important strategies when you're dealing with all of this. I think just good food, good routines, good movements, good sleep hygiene. That's huge, and that piece as well about thinking about your thinking. Like I always say with children that I'm working, your brain is like a Google search engine. So the more positive, brave thoughts that we have, that's going to build our confidence. The more we can ignite those positive thinking pathways in the brain. So we need to work on the world of the stories that our child are telling themselves, so that we can build them up to deal with these adversities that, of course, are always going to happen.
Loads of questions coming in. Can I raise one? Yeah. Because we're just one that is coming in. What about boundaries to protect our 13-year-old versus friends who call us strict and say our child has no freedoms? She has no phone by our choice. The child is now caught in the middle between us and the friends. Very stressful. What do we do?
Okay, really good question. And I would say stick to your boundaries. Actually, the more permissive style of parenting leads to higher levels of anxiety. There's a lot of research around that. So, reason with your child around why you're putting those boundaries in place, that it is for their child's own good. And if the child is giving out, as any 13-year-old is going to do, it's just them moving towards the boundary. Stick with it, try and get a balance, but boundaries are essential.
Maria, thank you very much. That is Maria Osborne, educational and child psychologist.